Okay, so last one, best one, right? This is going to be lesson 25 for your last homework assignment, 8.2. And we have to solve equations, but they're not factored first. So we have to factor them. When I originally looked at the problems that were popping up, they seemed pretty cut and dry. And then looked at it again, and then they're kind of horrible. So I'm going to actually work through the ones that popped up when I just did this. So the name of the game is to, first goal is to get it into factored form. And again, what that means is that we want something times something equals 0. So we have to like unfoil or take out the greatest common factor. So we might have something where it might just be a greatest common factor type of thing, right? You might have something that says like 9x squared minus 3x equals 0. Okay. So this x squared means we're going to have two answers. They might be the same or they might be two different numbers. But here, this is not factorable into like a group of 2 times a group of 2. You always want to look and check for a greatest common factor. You can ignore that. You're just focused right here. So between 9x squared and a 3x, is there a number in front that I can divide both numbers by? Yeah, we can divide both of these numbers by 3. And do they share anything else in common? Yep, they both have an x, at least one x to them. So the GCF, or the greatest common factor, will be 3x. Okay? So I'm going to factor that out first. I'm going to take 3x from this equation. And so 9 divided by 3 is 3. I'm taking 1x away from x squared. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And x, taking away this x away from that, so there's no x, right? Anything divided by itself is 1. So now I have it in factored form. There's nothing else I can do. There's nothing more I can take out. So now we have it something times something equals 0. So we set up our two somethings and solve. So again, this one will be 0. When we add 1, we get 3x equals 1. Divide by 3, x equals 1/3. So we're going to have two answers here. We're going to have 0 and 1/3. The trinomials they've been throwing out were ones that needed more work. But let's go through just a regular old nice one. Let's go through x squared plus 9x plus 14 equals 0. Okay. So it's set equal to 0. So we're off to a good start. There's nothing in common with all three things. So here, that means I probably should try to do that. Okay, unfoil it. So again, what times what gets us x squared? Well, we know x times x gets us that. What times what multiplies to get 14, but adds to get 9? So if you think about our factors of 14, we know that's 7 and 2. 7 plus 2 gets us 9. Since this is positive, they have to have the same sign. And since this is positive, they're both plus. So now that we've set it into factored form, I got x plus 7 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. So to solve this one, we're going to subtract 7. I'm running out of room. I don't know why I set it up like this. So we get x equals -7. Subtract 2. x equals -2. So here we have our two answers. But homework seems to make it a little bit more challenging, I guess, for the fun of it. And they like using different letters, so I'm just going to use what they popped up. Okay, so instead of x's, we're using m's. And again, it's set equal to 0, so that's good. When we look at these three terms, there's nothing in common with all three that we can factor out, no greatest common factor. So we're going to have to do this thing again, right? But this 5 in front throws us into that little loop, right? Where we know we have to have something times something to get 6, -6, but this 5 in here might screw that up. So this is going back to what I use, called the illegal maneuver. I always spell it wrong, I think. So it has those 5 steps. The first step is to multiply the leading coefficient to what they call the constant, or I'll just call it the back number. And we're worried about this right here. We're not worried about that 0 right now. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take this, we're going to multiply it to that 6. So we get 30. And step 2 was factor as usual. And so when we think about what we are looking at, you know, something times something gets us m squared. And some number times some number multiplies to get 30, but adds or subtracts to get that -1, right? So since this is a minus, we know the only way to multiply and get a negative, one has to be plus, one has to be minus. And we think of the factors of 30, we think of 5 and 6, because the difference between those two gets us 1, right? We have 5 and 6. And now the question is, okay, well, which one's going to be plus, which one's going to be minus? Because it matters for your answer. So you think back, if we want to get a -1, that means that our bigger number has to carry this sign. So the bigger number between these two is 6. So the 6 will get the minus and the 5 will get the plus. -6 plus 5 gets us a -1. All right, now we got to bring back the leading coefficient. And that was 5. We bring it back like a fraction. Okay. And step 4 was reduce if possible. So it's possible to reduce this, not possible to reduce that. That's okay, that happens. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. Can't reduce that. And then last but not least, remember if there's a denominator, scooch up the denominator. No denominator left in this group, so we can just, nothing to scooch. But here we have that 5. So we're going to scooch that 5 up in front. And now that it's factored, we set it back equal to 0 that it was originally, and we can solve these two answers. So we have this one, m plus 1 equals 0, and 5m minus 6 equals 0. So to solve for this one, we subtract 1, we get m equals -1. So that's one of our answers. Here, we're going to have to add 6. And now we divide both sides by 5. And fractions happen, so it is okay. So we have these two answers, these two solutions for our answer. So again, we had m squared up here. So that tells us we're going to have two answers, okay? Because we had different stuff in our groups, we had two different answers. They get keen on doing something a little bit more, which again, did not look like that when I first looked at these questions. So it's something like this. Now again, first make sure is it set equal to 0. Yep, so that's cool. But just like I've been saying before, always check to see if there's a greatest common factor. Okay? In this case, there is, which is good because we don't want to start factoring a cubed yet. But this a cubed tells us that there's going to be not two answers, but three answers. Okay? So when we look at these three terms, we want to look at the big numbers in front and the letters attached, the variables. So between a 4, a 10, and a 6, what can we divide evenly a 4 and a 10 and a 6 by? You're right, we can use 2. And this has an a to the third, a squared, and this has an a. So again, we have to take out the same amount of a's evenly from each thing, and this only has 1 to give, so we can only take out 2a. So 2a comes out, and that will leave us with the stuff on the inside. And I'm going to tell you, the stuff on the inside, again, we have to unfoil. So here, 4 divided by 2 is 2. We're taking a away from a to the third. 10 divided by 2 is 5, taking 1a away from that, leaving us with a single a. 6 divided by 2 is 3, taking away that a. So we have part of it already. We already have one of our factors. Because it is something times something, right? But now what they want us to do is to unfoil that. So here, again, we can use guess and check method, just, start guessing. I'm going to use that same type of process that I did before. I'm going to multiply this to the back. And I'm going to factor as usual. So I know a times a gets us a squared. And what times what gets us a -6, but adds to get 5. So this one's a tricky one. A lot of times we think 3 and 2, because 3 times 2 does multiply to get us 6, and 3 plus 2 does get us 5. But you gotta think about this sign back here, because when we multiply something here and here, we get a -6. So that means one thing has to be plus, one thing has to be a minus. So when we combine it, we would have to subtract or take the difference. So if we use 3 and 2, right? Well, if I put 3 and 2 in here, and one's plus, one's a minus, the difference of that is 1, not 5. So the other set of factors for 6 is actually just 1 and 6. So when I multiply 1 times 6, I get a negative, but my difference is a +5. So that means that, again, the higher number between your two things here takes this sign. So we're going to have a +6 and a -1. So 6 minus 1 gets us +5. The third step is we bring back that, that leading coefficient, right? That 2. We want to bring back 2. And we're going to reduce if possible. So it's not possible to reduce this. That's okay. It is possible to reduce that. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. And now we're going to take this denominator and scooch it in front, that last step. So we have now, in factored form, we have unfoiled all of this to these two groups, but we still have this one up here, okay? So it's like, whoop, coming all the way down. So now we have something times something times something equals 0. So we're going to have 3 somethings now. So we're going to have 3 answers. So we're going to set up that first something equal to 0. Our second something equal to 0. And our third something equal to 0. And we do what we have to do with each thing to solve. So A equals 0 for that. Here, when we divide by 2, we get A equals 1/2. Kind of had that up there already. And here, subtract 3. And we have our 3 answers. So I think when you enter them, I'm not sure if you're supposed to enter them least to greatest, but I don't think it matters. Okay. And let me do one more of those. So they like to also throw in that negative coefficient first. So again, way to, look at it the first thing, make sure it's that equal to 0, check. There's 3 different terms, and we have an m to the third. So m to the third right here tells us there's 3 answers. So here, because we have 3 things, we want to see if there's a greatest common factor. So we have 9, 33, and 18. We want to think, well, what can I divide 9, 33, and 18 by? I can divide 9 and 18 by 9, but I can't divide 33 by 9, which sucks. But I know I can divide 9, 33, and 18 by 3. So that's something to take out. So they all have m's. Oops, sorry, I should have an m squared. And so we're not just going to take out a 3, we're going to take out the 3m to it. And to make your life easier, when you unfoil something, it's always easiest if this first thing is positive. So rather than taking out a just 3, we're going to take out a negative 3m. So this bad boy up here is left as a positive number. So when we take out this negative 3m, we're divided out. Negative 9 divided by negative 3 is a positive. Taking 1m away from these 3 of them, so that leaves me with squared. Negative 33 divided by negative 3 is a positive 11, taking 1m away. And negative 18 divided by negative 3 is a positive 6. And I took that m away from that. But again, want to remember that that common factor is still kind of out in front. Just waiting now to see what's up. What are we going to do here? Okay. So again, we could just kind of pick numbers and guess and check and FOIL it out and blah, 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 but ain't nobody got time for that. So I'll multiply that to the back, 18. I'm going to factor as usual. So think of what are the factors that multiply to get 18, but add to get 11. So we have 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, right? So 2 times 9 gets us 18, 2 plus 9 gets us 11. And just like before, we're going to bring back that coefficient. We're going to reduce if possible. So not possible to reduce 2/3, but is possible to reduce this. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. And that last step, remember, is take this denominator and scooch it up. And scooch. And boop, this bad boy comes down. So taking out a -3 first helps us make sense of this. Makes it a lot more easy. Yeah, easier. So now we have our 3 somethings. It's set in factored form. It's set equal to 0. So we can do our 3 different answers. So we set this equal to 0, set this equal to 0, and set this equal to 0. Okay. 0 divided by any non-zero number will be 0. Here we subtract. Divide both sides by 3. Here all we have to do is subtract. So we have our 3 different answers. So when you enter it, just enter all 3 with those commas. Okay. So the questions were getting a little gross. Apologize for that. Hopefully it won't give you too much grief. Just remember to factor out what you can at first. If there is something to factor, unfoil it and get your answer. So hopefully it'll be somewhat painless. Hoping, crossing my fingers, not flipping off. All right, so it's been swell, and I hope to see you guys very soon. Bye.